going to talk a little bit about asymmetric deflations. A lot of different ways you can cause deflations. Several different ways you can deal with your deflations. Turns out they did some tests on the glider you're polyflying, and they gave it a rating, which means generally the glider was recovering in a certain amount of turn with a certain amount of dive by itself. So it goes to reason that if we do some deflations and we help the glider out a little bit, it shouldn't be quite so dramatic. As well, if we do some deflations and let the glider turn and do as it was certified to do, it shouldn't be too awful dramatic either, and it'll give us some reference for what the glider does on its own. It all starts with you getting up in the air with some adequate altitude, of course, in an appropriate environment. I don't recommend you practice deflations over the dirt or at your home site. Although it doesn't happen often, wingtips can get tangled, riser twists can happen, things can go wrong. So get yourself in a good environment. Then start gentle, work up incrementally as you know what you're giving yourself. Okay, that's very important. Sometimes we have people that show up and they pull a 70-80% deflation on their first one. It turns them and they recover, but they're like, oh wow. I was like, hey, no, we want to start more gentle. So what we'd rather have you do is start with your brake in your hand. Reach up and grab the A riser and the split riser that you want to deflate on its side. Look at it. Pull it down gently. As soon as it deflates, release. That's that. Got her open right back up. Cause a little bit of a turn. Great. Then you're going to pull a little harder. Pull it down a little harder, release. Glider starts to turn, it's going to open up. Okay? Then we're going to work up to causing larger deflations by adjusting our grip. We can have our brakes in our hands, we can have our thumb down, pinky up, twist and pull, release. That's going to cause a bigger deflation. And then we can use the speed system, add half speed system. Thumb up, pinky down, pull it down, release. You want to release the speed. And if the glider is turning and not recovering, then you're going to add opposite brake. So generally, if you look at the glider and you see that the glider is not opening from the deflation, and if it's turning towards it and advancing, then you can add confident, steady, opposite brake to the deflation until it stops and you start to swing under it. Once the transition between stopping the turn and you starting to swing under, that's when you might want to just be a little careful with the brake and then weight shift extra hard. The glider should actually be recovering about that time. And if you are going to give a pump to get the glider to come out with a pump, maybe because you have a 2-3 or a 3 glider, then that's the time to give the pump. After the correction, then pump. We do spend a lot of time when we fly and we thermal feeling the glider, and when one side tries to deflate, we come down and we try and prevent it, and often we do. Okay? But if it does deflate, we need to switch gears and then go to flying the side of the glider that's still opening, making a correction where you're not overdoing it, but you're keeping the glider in control. And then after the glider is, you're feeling some sense of control, maybe opening the glider. If we get a deflation and we just go to open it without weight shifting away and adding opposite brake, two things happen. One, it'll turn us more than it would have, and then it'll come slamming open and maybe lurch forward on a shock reinflation. Okay, so that's one of the problems with opening the glider before you counter, is it can come slamming open and surge forward and maybe re-deflate. It's called a shock reinflation. Sometimes those happen anyway. Some gliders are more prone to it than others. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just something that can happen. And from what I've noticed is if you make a correction to fly the glider that's not deflated first, then if the glider isn't opening on its own, maybe pump it out last, it seems to be a smoother endeavor. If you get that deflation and it slams back open and surges forward in a shock reinflation, what I generally recommend is just going to about 1/3 brakes and holding it for a moment, and then as you start to swing under, release. Okay? And that's generally when things get weird or glider surges or you're not sure what to do. Generally come down to about chest high for a moment and just give it a moment, and then you'll know whether it's time to release. Asymmetric deflations, you can get them real big, and here's the way we generally do it. 3 different ways to get them big. One way, you can just let go of the brake, plug it into the riser. Grab the riser with no brake in hand, pull it down quick, release. When you have no brake in hand, pulling down doesn't also pull brake deflection, so the glider is going to really let that tip go down. If the tip really goes down, the glider will want to start to turn towards it. As it starts to turn towards it, you're going to add opposite brake and some weight shift to control the glider. As soon as it stops its turn and you start to swing under it, you're going to be careful with the brake and add extra weight shift. Glider will open up. Not opening, quick pump, release, count to 2 seconds. 1, 2, quick pump, release, count to 2 seconds. This pumping action you see so much and you hear so much about. It's all about to get the glider reinflated and then release before it causes turn that you don't want, okay? So the thing to keep in mind with pumps is it's 100% brake range, release as fast as you can. And then count to 2 seconds to let the glider get that airspeed back to full speed, and then release. 1, 2, release. So what we see people do is pull about 30% brake and then pull from 30 into about 45 and keep holding it. That's not it. That's just, it's not enough to get it inflated, and it's not letting the glider get its airspeed, so you're better off all the way down to release. 1, 2. All the way down, release. Okay, so that's enough of that. We did the no brake in hand. Now we can do no brake in hand, speed bar engaged, cause a deflation, correct, release the speed. Once it stops its dive and you start to swing under it, ease up on the brake and weight shift, maybe open. It turns out you can keep the glider flying straight with a very large deflation if you have a nice feel and a timely input. You can pull down a quick deflation and add brake as soon as it starts to turn, and if you're feeling the brake and looking at the glider, you can see if it's going to stall, and you can prevent a turn completely. Okay, so let's start out with a left side deflation. We'll start with brake in hand. We're just going to grab it, we pull it, release, and the glider's going to turn a bit if we do nothing. That's basically the nature of a smaller deflation with no input. On those smaller deflations, they're not hard to counter and fly straight. You do want to make sure that you're on a safe heading, so you pull it down. If you add some brake, it doesn't take that much, you can fly it straight. If you don't let it turn, it doesn't open that quick. It takes some energy to come from somewhere. And that's just the nature of that. It's all about being quick with the wing and feeling the brake pressure. Just like in a normal stall, if you have that deflation and the side that's not deflated, if you add brake too far, the pressure will start to reduce, and you can even see it in the canopy. So it's okay if you think you're going to stall to let off for a moment, and then as it starts to just advance a little bit, come back to it and feel it again. It's all about brake feel. Asymmetric deflations, we like to prevent them. Once they go, fly the side of the glider that you've got, control the glider a bit. Well-certified glider opens up on its own. If it's not, give it a quick pump all the way down and release. Count to 2 seconds, quick pump all the way down and release. That's it. Asym deflations.
counter. It and we'll counter steer, and you can see you can turn. Oh, we spun it. It's okay.